bear with me. I'm going to read to you from an article. It's important that I read you the article backwards first. It's in the Intelligencer. It's regarding Uber is headed for a crash. The final paragraph, because I know most people will not. That's a TL, don't read, too long, don't read kind of thing. But here we go. This is the essential and the most important, so listen carefully. Uber has succeeded in getting the business press to treat its popularity as the same as commercial success. A few tech reporters like Eric Newcomer of Bloomberg have politely pointed out that Uber's results fall well short of other tech illuminati prior to going public. The pitch that dominance would produce profits is demonstrably false, and Uber seems unable to come up with a new story. There's every reason to think that investors, not local cab companies, will wind up being Uber's biggest roadkill. What about driverless cars? Let's put aside that some enthusiasts like Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak now believe that fully automatic cars are never going to happen. Fully autonomous cars would mean Uber would have to own the cars. The capital costs would be staggering and would burst the illusion that Uber is a technology company rather than a taxi company that buys and operates someone else's robot cars. The most important thing I want to read to you is regarding Uber's current quarter results, the current financial quarter. They posted a jaw-dropping $1 billion loss for the quarter, and after $4.5 billion losses in 2017. How much is hype and how much is real? Okay, so the other thing I wanted to point out is about Deutsche Bank. They were given an offer to invest in Uber as in a private investment before the IPO, which is the initial public offering. Now, your eyes might be glossing over. At this point, it sounds too technical for me. I'm just a driver. How does this affect me? Within the article, they talk about, after you consider your expenses, how drivers are averaging less than $10 an hour. As a driver, I feel this. I have felt this because Uber has recently dropped the rates, and it's noticeable. The pay cuts have led to more driver turnover, which leads to higher managerial costs, and it's degrading service quality. A comment on an article in Uber's third quarter earnings. I needed a ride from Burbank to LAX on a Thursday morning around 5:45. I requested a ride the night before. At pickup time, there wasn't a Lyft or Uber within 20 miles. When I did get one, the driver said at the rate they were being paid, it wasn't worth getting out of bed early anymore. Uber's other way of making its margins less terrible has been ditching its worst operations. But even then, Uber's new CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, effectively admitted that Uber isn't profitable in any market when you factor in corporate overheads. They've been frantically adding new businesses like Uber Eats and scooter rentals to keep its growth story alive. Uber not only tacitly admits that they aren't covering their costs, it refused to give any detail about these operations beyond the reviews and does not discuss what it would take for them to turn the corner. All right, so I also want to go back to, bear with me, again, I'm extracting what I feel is the meat of this article. Uber has gone to some length to avoid publishing financial information on a consistent basis over time, a big red flag. One telling example, in late 2016, Uber targeted a share offering to high-end retail investors, which were presumably even dumber money than the Saudis that had invested in the previous round. Nevertheless, both JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank turned down the opportunity to market Uber shares to their clients, even though this could jeopardize their position for a future Uber IPO. Why? The ride-sharing company supplied 290 pages of verbiage, but not its net income or even annual revenues. A big red flag. And let's see, investor funding. The investors, they're relying on they're mentioning in this article that Uber is talking about an IPO, an initial public offering in 2019. Now, I want to quote exactly what she said. What he or she, I don't know. The author of this is a Male. Eve Smith. I believe that's a male. The notion that Uber, the most highly valued private company in the world, is a textbook bezel. John Kenneth Galbraith's coinage for an investment swindle where the losses have yet to be recognized is likely to come as a surprise to its many satisfied customers. Yeah, many satisfied customers, many dissatisfied drivers. Okay, what has made Uber a good deal for users makes it a lousy investment proposition. Uber has kept that recognition at bay via minimal and inconsistent financial disclosure combined with relentless and so far effective public relations campaign depicting Uber as following the pattern of digitally based startups whose large initial losses transferred into strong profits in a few years. Unlike these startups like eBay or Amazon or even Facebook, no startup has gone as long as Uber in a negative cash situation, and they have not posted profit in over 5 years. Uber has never presented a case as to why it will ever be profitable, let alone earn an adequate return on capital. Investors are pinning their hopes on a successful IPO, which means finding greater fools in sufficient numbers. Uber is a taxi company with an app attached. It bears almost no resemblance to internet superstars it claims to emulate. The app is not technically daunting and does not create a competitive barrier, as witnessed by the fact that many other players have copied apps that have been introduced for airlines, pizza delivery, and hundreds of other consumer services, but have never generated market share gains, much less tens of billions in corporate value. They do not create network effects. Unlike Facebook or eBay, having more Uber users does not improve the service. After a certain point does adding more drivers. Uber does regularly claim that an app creates economies of scale for drivers, but for that to be the case, adding more drivers would have to benefit drivers. It doesn't. More drivers means more competition for available job, which means less utilization per driver. There's a trade-off between capacity. And I lost my place. Okay. Uber's own results are proof. Uber has kept bulking up, yet it has failed to show the rapid margin improvements you'd see if costs fell as operations grow. I want to mention the many giga businesses have no clue when they start about how they will become behemoths. Now money just blows. But Uber has established a large business in cities over the world. Yeah, it's easy to get a lot of traffic by selling at a discount. Uber is subsidizing ride costs. Across all its businesses, Uber was providing services at only roughly 74% of their cost in its last quarter. Uber was selling its services at only 64% of their cost in 2017 with a GAA profit margin of negative 57%. As a reference point, in its worst 4 quarters, Amazon lost $1.4 billion on $2.8 billion in sales for a negative margin of 50%. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Uber just posted a quarter loss of 57% of over $1 billion. Amazon reacted by firing over 15% of its workers. Uber defenders might argue that that's a big improvement from 2015 when revenues only covered 43% of costs. And the GAAP margin was negative 132%, but we'll discuss in more detail the reduction in how much Uber spends to get average dollar. Okay, and basically the funding I mentioned is that the big banks, the big corporations steer clear of Uber, and that's a sign right there. Here, this is the most important one, and probably the one I'll finish with. The only advantage that Uber might have achieved is taking advantage of its drivers' lack of financial acumen. That's you and me. It means you don't know about money. Their lack of financial acumen, that they don't understand the full cost of using their cars and thus are giving Uber a bargain. There's some evidence to support that notion. Rides recently published the results of the first study to use actual Uber driver earnings validated by screenshots. Using conservative estimates for vehicle costs, they found that Uber X drivers, which represent the bulk of its workforce, earn less than $10 an hour. They would do better at McDonald's. But even this offset to the generally higher costs of fleet operation hasn't had a meaningful impact on Uber's economics. So I'm going off their script right now to speak to you directly, you, my viewer. What I want to say is basically there's been in the news last night, New York State has forced both Uber and Lyft to pay their drivers a minimum of $17 an hour, which is great for the drivers that are there. It opens up a whole other can of worms, which would be that we're no longer independent contractors. Drivers would be considered employees in that sense. And as an employee, they're entitled to health care benefits, workman's compensation, things that Uber and Lyft would like to steer clear. I didn't mention Lyft in the article. The article doesn't mention Lyft, but it's the same basic principle. I don't know how much transparency Lyft has about its earnings, but Uber is insidious. So why do I bring this up? Just to make you aware. I'll put the link to the actual article if you choose to read it yourself. Basically, it's the emperor's new clothes. And I can't say I have any, I'm not shedding any tears for Uber. I had a passenger in my car this morning. She was a woman who had actually been abducted by an Uber driver and sexually assaulted. And I said, well, I'm sure at least Uber was cooperative. And she said, no, they weren't. They weren't cooperative in telling her who the driver was. They weren't cooperative with the legal investigation process. Consumerism or capitalism without consciousness. That's all I have to say for now. Just beware. And Uber should beware. And big corporations take advantage of their employees or their workforce. In my estimation, are scum that should rot in hell. Thank you.